The word on the street seems to be that business isn't paying its fair share of tax. And this seems to be bubbling up at a time when lots of people are having to tighten their belts. I think it's a fair question, but I've got a really clear answer. Yeah, business is paying the right amount of tax. And what the CBI is doing in its report today is showing that actually business last year paid 163 billion of tax to the Exchequer, and that's a quarter of all the taxes paid in Britain. And it's the same amount of tax as German business, French business and US business. So it's a fight back to deal with some of the misunderstandings that business can somehow get away with not paying tax. That's not true.
I think businesses are relatively open about their tax payments. A lot of this information can be found both in annual reports and in statutory accounts, which are publicly available. However, there is a problem with some of these tax numbers because they don't always seem to match. It's very difficult for one business to stand up and say, I mean, as a number of companies have found, they've had their stores invaded on the high street. This is now quite an emotional issue, and therefore if one company tries to stand up and explain it, then they become the target. So that's one of the reasons why the CBI has got involved with this, because the CBI as an umbrella organisation is able to make the case more broadly and at the same time sort of has that public role which allows it to do that. So I think that this is something for the CBI to do. Now in terms of further disclosure, I think businesses need to be open, and indeed many of them are, about why they do tax planning. As we discussed downstairs, tax is an important cost, and therefore you don't want to pay more tax than is owing. At the same time, the thing that the report tries to do is to make this case that actually things have changed a lot over the past 10 years. Part of that is the actions that governments have taken, but also part is that corporations, the companies have taken. And I think we need to make more of our case that actually we are good corporate citizens.
I think a lot of business do struggle to know which side of the line that they're falling on. They rightly take advantage of allowances and reliefs which are there to incentivise certain behaviours, investment for instance, which is absolutely what they should be doing. But with the complexity in the tax system which has been built up over centuries, it's really hard for them sometimes to understand what's going on. The complexity makes decision making very difficult. So what we're pushing forward in Policy Exchange is actually that we need quite significant reform of the tax system to make it more simple, more straightforward and more certain for businesses who are using it. In that way, they can spend more time doing what they should be doing, which is innovating, creating growth, creating jobs, doing the things business should be doing, rather than trying to manage the tax affairs, employing people to make sure they're paying the right amount of tax, thinking about those sorts of things all the time. I think this is particularly a problem for small firms where they might not have the facilities or the staff to do these sorts of things. So a report we published recently outlined an idea where you take small businesses and startups completely out of the mainstream tax system and give them a flat tax. That will allow them to concentrate on their core business and give them complete certainty of the sort of tax to be paying. And that kind of certainty, simplicity and stability in the tax system is really what we think needs to happen.
I think the UK is competitive, and certainly what's taken place over the past 2 years with this government, but also, again, to be fair, starting with the last government. The UK international tax system has become considerably more competitive, and there are now, at least if you believe what some of your members are telling us, there are companies which are queuing up to come to the UK. So I think that's a very positive sign. Do we need to be the most competitive, which is the target which the government has set itself? I think that would be great. But I think we need to be more competitive than most. I think that's the important thing. And I think that's where the government is getting us towards. And certainly with the cut in the corporate tax rate, as well as the action that they've taken on international taxation, I think we're getting there.
Where lies the problem? It's a complex issue. For those of us paying our income tax through the employer, through PAYE, the amount of tax you pay is reasonably predictable. The problem with companies is it isn't like that. And actually, we get criticism in business that we've paid less tax than the tax rate. Well, probably we've paid less tax than the tax rate because the government encouraged us to have a tax allowance, maybe for research and development. So it's a complex issue. But I don't think business has been particularly good about this. I don't think they've been on the front foot getting their message across. And actually, business has got to get out there and provide information to the public. So the answer is more information sharing to build up more understanding.
I think obviously if an individual business comes forward and puts its case forward, I think there's a problem there because they might get jumped on by the media or by pressure groups. And I think so it's absolutely right that CBI is doing this and actually putting forward a united front. It's harder to shoot them down if you were. So I think obviously businesses can be quite concerned about looking bad, and so they need someone like the CBI and indeed Policy Exchange to come forward and say businesses should be paying the right amount of tax, the right sorts of taxes, but we need to have a sensible discussion about that based on evidence, not just on rhetoric and politics.
The long-term objective for Britain must be to have a simpler tax system so that we can have lower levels of taxation. At the moment, the headline rates are often reduced by all those allowances, and it's the allowances that bring the complexity. Now, businesses don't like change. They don't want change to what they've got, but actually the long-term answer must be a tax rule book that's one of the shortest in the world. At the moment, our tax rule book is the longest in the world.